Okay, so apparently we're already live on YouTube.
Our members will join.
Our members, I mean, we're just waiting for members to join. I will start at 6:05. We'll give them 10 minutes to join.
Sure.
It's 5 to 6 right now.
And how long do we carry this?
I think about half an hour. I don't think we'll have too much more to talk about after half an hour. But if you do have something to say, then we aren't going to cut this short.
Yeah,
We'll keep going as long as there is something to say.
I've gone live on YouTube, so can you please check if you're receiving the feed?
And yeah, so I guess now I've got like kind of suggested topics from Anant and from Aparajita. Shavir, is there, apart from the income tax stuff, is there something in particular you want to speak about?
So there were a couple of points which I wanted to touch upon.
Yeah.
So one was on this LRS liberalized remittance scheme. So where, previously they used to charge 5% TCS, now it's 20% TDS. So I mean, usse kya impact hoga? That is one thing which I wanted to talk about. Because first it was here. So it was once you spend 7 lakh abroad in foreign remittances, then 5% TCS will be deducted.
Yeah.
So agar 7 lakh ka limit nahi hua, then it will be reversed, right? So now it is without, there is no capping, seedha 20% TDS katega. How that impacts is when we, buy stocks of say Google or Apple even from IND money, even then we'll have to pay 20% TDS.
Yeah.
Now what that does is, it becomes cash flow issues because you pay TDS, then you reclaim that in your filing, and also it becomes a bit of a hassle. So that is one bit I wanted to touch upon. Another was we have seen all these insurance companies, tanking sort of. Aaj unka sabka stock, took a massive beating, 10%, 11% down. So why is that the case? I mean, so that also I wanted to touch upon. First, abhi kya hota tha, people were treating all these insurance products like investment products. Agents were only selling that way. So now what has changed? Because as we move from old regime to new regime, we will stop, all these deductions, ATC, ATD, all of this will stop. And eventually, people will stop buying insurance just to save taxes.
Yeah, correct.
So, that is one thing also I wanted to touch upon, how the psychology of an end consumer or an investor will change. Now, sort of they'll move from, because of these deductions we used to save in PPF, PFs, and all of that. Abhi with this new regime, वैसा कुछ नहीं है. There is nothing of that sort. So it is possible, that we don't end up saving anything. We just spend all of our salary. So is that mindset something which
desirable?
Yeah.
So,
are we becoming that kind of economy where we don't save and just spend? So that is another point which I wanted to touch upon.
Sure, absolutely. I will note that down. So yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you all of you who have already joined. We will be going live in just about 5 minutes. We're just waiting for a few more of you to join us. And so far, we've just been chatting. The webinar hasn't really started. We've just been chatting about the various ways that this budget has and can impact all of us. The common people, the salaried people, women, marginalized sections of society. To some extent, the rich. There's various elements to this budget, and so I was just kind of hammering out the details with our panelists to see what all we want to touch upon this, in this webinar, because it's, even though she spoke for a shorter amount of time, she kind of packed in quite a lot in this budget speech, and we won't have time to go over everything. And in any case, the focus of this webinar is more about, like, who spent my money, and hopefully now we can spend more of our money. That's the takeaway that I have. But of course, we have three experts here, and they will tell us more. And now, if all of you also have any questions, our panels are open to questions to our members and subscribers. You can send in, those who are joining us on Zoom, you can send us the questions in the chat box on Zoom, and the subscribers on YouTube can send it on that chat box. I have people here who are going to be sending me the questions, and I will then ask the panel these questions. And so that's the other thing also I wanted to say, that if I do look away, it's because I'm looking at my phone to look at the questions that all of you are sending. It's not that I'm getting distracted, that I'm getting bored by the conversation. Don't think that. It's just me tracking the questions so that I can ask all of you. So yeah, we'll just wait exactly 3 more minutes, and then we will go live. Although we are live, it's just we will start the webinar. So, I mean, overall, like, now again, this is a question I will ask once the webinar starts. But if we were to rank it on 10, this budget, what would you say, Anant?
No, it's actually it's a very interesting budget, and a little bit surprising as well, in the sense that, in the run up to the budget, of course, there are multiple expectations that people had sort of expressed, but the overarching majority had sort of become comfortable with the position that, this is the last full budget before election.
Yeah.
It's going to be a tightrope walk. And it's not going to be a very populous budget. In some sense, I think, to a large extent, it has exceeded some of those expectations. And some of the things in the budget we sort of expected. I mean, some of the rationalizations in the personal income tax slabs and so on and so forth. But the impact of that is to me going to be particularly interesting. Right,
of course. And Shavir, is it the same for you?
Yeah, broadly, I mean, it was kind of a budget which had, something for everyone: taxpayers, MSMEs, pensioners, startups. Clear sign that we are on a sustainable growth path with a fiscal deficit target of 5.9%, and while spending very heavily on capex. I mean, that's a brilliant sign.
Yeah,
we are enjoying our tailwinds. And I think I can confidently say that we are in the right direction.
Excellent. And Aparajita, come on, say that, no, this is a terrible budget.
No, I don't think it's a terrible budget. I think it's different from what was expected. I think especially people who track social sector, because as Anant mentioned, this is the last full budget before the elections. And usually there are some more social sector spending that happens in the run up to elections, which, I mean, of course, now there's been a lot of debate on, what that spending should look like.
Right.
So people who have been tracking the social sector, I think some of the things that they probably expected are not actually reflected in the budget. But I think also because there's so much focus on skilling and employment, I do think that the government is aware that that's a big thing on people's mind, and also will be politically super relevant in the next 1 year. And I think a lot of, this support that is being given to capital expenditure, I mean, the hope is that it translates into employment opportunities, both in urban and rural areas. So I think there is a realization in the government that, this is something that people will look forward to in the run up to elections. But I think the way we thought it will pan out, it hasn't panned out in the same sense by giving more budget to schemes, centrally sponsored schemes, etc. So I think that is a clear shift in government's thinking around how social sector also needs to be supported.
Right. Okay, so now it is 6:05, so I think it's time that we can start this webinar. Welcome all of you. Thank you so much for joining us for this post-budget webinar, where we look at the precise question, who spent my money? A kind of a fun look at budget 2023, because I can assure you there are a lot of non-fun ways to look at budget 2023 as well. You can go into all of the the numbers and what is the revenue expenditure, capital expenditure. We aren't going to look at any of those boring things. We're going to look at only the aspects that affect you, me, all of the panelists, just the Aam Aadmi ka budget, just what affects all of us. We actually have a pretty diverse panel. They're all experts in their fields. I'm going to actually have to read out their designations because they're actually pretty eminent people. We have Shavir Bansal, who is also known as Bekifaayati. Am I pronouncing that right?
Oh, it's Bekifaayati.
Bekifaayati, right. And he is a finfluencer. And now this is a term that I absolutely love. I've been following now, and basically he's got this real knack of taking complex personal finance topics and making it really simple for you to understand. And I thought that he'd be able to add a lot of value to our discussion. Now, I invited him, or we made an invitation to him before we knew that this budget would have so many personal tax things, but we're very, very glad that he's here, because he can break down all of them and tell us what it actually means for us. Who spent our money? Hopefully it's all of us who can spend more of our own money.
Thank you for having me, Sharad.
Oh, you're most welcome. Thank you for joining us. And next we have Aparajita Bharti, who's the founding partner at the Quantum Hub and also at the Young Leaders for Active Citizenship. Now, she has been an active proponent of things like the gender budget, looking at how budgets can incentivize the youth, how marginalized sections of society can possibly benefit from the budget, basically looking at the budget from the lens of the social sector. And I think this is absolutely important. It's absolutely critical, because it's very easy for a budget to become very desensitized to what the people actually need. And you start looking at these headline growth numbers and if we put money in capital expenditure, there's going to have a multiplier effect. They talk about the trickle down effect and all of that, but not all of it works. And so sometimes you need direct intervention. And whether this budget has done that or not adequately, she can tell us all about that. And finally, our third panelist, we have Anant Dang, who is the General Counsel and founding team of Mensa Brands. And he, of course, is expert on various aspects of, he can talk to us about personal taxation. He can talk about some of the finer aspects of taxation that affect startups and, how going ahead, they're going to spend the money that they get once they exit startups. And so, I think this is going to be quite an enriching conversation. So thank you all three of you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Shah.
And thank you all of you attendees, all of you who have joined us from the audience. Thank you so much. I will repeat what I had said in the beginning, that we encourage you to please send in your questions. You can send it, those who are joining us on Zoom, you can send us your questions on the chat box here. And those who are the print subscribers, you can on YouTube, you can send in your questions on YouTube. We have a team over here who's going to be sending me those questions, and I will ask our panel, whatever you ask. And I will repeat, when I'm looking at my phone, it's not because I'm getting bored, it's because I'm checking your questions so that I can, pass them on. So now I think we should get on with the show. So I think the first thing we should talk about, and Shavir, I'll start with you, is the changes on personal income tax. We'd start with the rebate that has been increased from
Correct.
lakhs to 7 lakhs. Now, I know that initially when she announced it, there was some confusion about what this actually means.
Correct.
Does it mean that everybody doesn't have to pay tax for, the first 7 lakhs of their income, or does it only apply to people who are earning up to 7 lakhs? So could you tell us a little
Yeah,
more?
yeah. Just to clarify, all these changes that we see, increasing of the cap and everything. So these are very specific to the new tax regime. So none of the changes are for the old tax regime. So there's a clear focus on increasing the adoption for the new tax regime. And to answer your question, Sharad, if a person is earning below 7 lakh, up till 7 lakh, only then will the person have to pay zero taxes. If the person is earning even 1 rupee more than the 7 lakh, then this exemption does not apply. Then the
Right.
normal, tax slabs will apply, which are, 0 to 3 lakh, there will be no tax, 3 to 6, there will be 5%, and 6 to 9, 10%. So then it will be, then the person will have to pay taxes as per that tax slab.
So let's take an example. Let's say suppose somebody
Yeah.
earns. Let's take two examples. Somebody earns 6 lakhs a year, and somebody who earns say 12 lakhs a year.
Sure. So someone who earns, so I'm just going through the example from the new tax slab regime.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's go. We'll talk about the older regime in just a bit, but right now all of this is for the
Correct.
new. Yeah.
So if a person earns say up to 6 lakh, then obviously the person won't have to pay any taxes. So zero taxes for a person who's earning anything below 7 lakh. Right.
Right.
Now, if the person is earning 12 lakh rupees, then from 0 to 3, that person won't have to pay any tax. So zero tax. From 3 to 6, 5%. So 5% on 3 lakh is about 15,000.
Right.
And then, so 15,000 tax. From 6 to 9, it is 10%. So
Okay.
3 lakh, so 10% on 3 lakh, 30,000. So up till 9 lakh, it is 45,000. And I think from 9 to 12, it is 15%, if I'm not wrong. So
Okay.
another 15% on 3 lakh. So that is about 45,000. So a person earning up to 12 lakh, they will have to pay 90,000 taxes. So that is.
And this is a significant improvement over the not the old regime, but the older new regime.
It is about, I would say, 15% improvement over the new tax regime as per previous.
The old new regime.
Yeah, the old new regime. It is about 15% improvement. But if you still consider all the deductions which you get in the old tax regime, I would say the old tax regime is still better if the person avails all the deductions.
The exemptions, yeah, right. And so now we have a question from the audience. What's the government's definition of the middle class, and who was this budget primarily for? So now I'm going to actually open this question to all three of you. Let's start with Anant. What does the government define the middle class as?
I wish I knew what the government defines the middle class as, but I can give you my perception of it.
Right.
Middle class is basically those who are earning enough to be able to meet their expense.
Okay.
And so therefore, if you want to put like a mathematical number to it, I think, for me, for example, it would be somebody earning 6 lakhs or 7 lakhs and upwards,
right,
up until a certain amount of threshold. But I don't know how the government actually sees this. But I think when they say, look, this is a budget where for the first time there has been some kind of consideration to the middle class, I think that in some sense is true. At least the way I see it. And for those of you watching, there was a new tax regime that was introduced by our finance minister about 3 years back.
2020, right?
2020, yeah, 2020. And therefore, and the difference between these two budgets is that one has a flat rate of taxation where you cannot avail any deductions. And the older tax regime also, it allowed you to claim certain deductions, and therefore your eventual taxable income would be reduced to the extent of the deductions that are available. And over the years, the old tax regime actually, it has been iterated. So what you can and cannot reduce and what you can and cannot claim has changed So what I think is particularly interesting, and this is, for those who are entering the job market, for example, and who have an income of up to 7 lakhs, and by the way, statistically, I was reading somewhere, for those who are accessible to income tax, about 80%, 70 to 80% of those individuals are actually below the 7 lakh, the 7 lakh income bracket.
Really?
That's right. I mean, it's some statistics that I was reading. I wish I could quote.
I'm going. I'm gonna follow up on that. Try to do a story on it maybe tomorrow.
Yeah. So So you'll see that it's going to be in thereabouts. And for those individuals, they don't have to pay tax. They're not subject to income tax, and therefore it is that amount of cash that is back in their pocket, which they can, of course, use to either save or consume. Most likely scenarios that this is an impetus to encourage consumption.
It's also an impetus to encourage all of these people onto the new regime, right? Even though, as you say, the old regime might be more beneficial, but now if they're not paying any tax at all up to 7 lakhs, then these guys, I mean, what greater benefit can you get?
Well, I think that here I'll maybe take I'll probably take a little bit from what Shavir had said a little while earlier. For those who are earning an income, say 20 lakhs and above, where they have the ability to more meaningfully invest and therefore claim deductions more meaningfully.
Right.
The problem with the new regime, the old new regime, was that the rate of absorption was pretty low. Because if you were to take out your calculator with all the deductions that you were sort of entitled to, you would find that for those individuals who are earning 20 lakh rupees and above up to a certain threshold, you were able to bring your effective income a little bit lower,
right?
And therefore the absorption was low. Now with the tax slab getting reset and the widening of the slab, I think across each and every one of those slabs. You'd probably have to open your calculator all over again to assess how meaningful the switch to the new regime, to the new regime is going to be.
Right, that's true. And so, Aparajita.
Add to your point, I think you made a very interesting point, and I was also thinking about it, that most of the people who are entering the job market would actually fall under the 7 lakh thing, and we are a young country. So I also think that, ultimately all budgets are political statements in that sense as well. And they actually see the value of, young voters not having to pay that income tax. Also, this has been on our agenda to simplify the tax regime since a long, long time. If you remember, I think when GST code was being discussed, even before BJP came into power, there was a direct tax code that was discussed. So we've been, as a country, moving in this direction that we simplify our tax regime in some sense, because, giving exemptions is, even though it may be beneficial, it's administratively a huge hassle for employers, for taxpayers, for the government itself to keep on trying whether you can avail of it.
It's a huge burden for all of us when we're trying to calculate our tax incidence as well. Kitna tax dena padega,
And now, people, if you look at the entire budget, the government wants to let go of these small disputes that it keeps having its own citizens, right? Like with the MSMEs, there was something Vivad Khatam Karo. So, there's this whole movement towards simplifying governance. So I do feel that this is being seen as an incentive for people to move. And once people move, as you rightly pointed out, 70 to 80% people who would be joining the workforce as they move to this tax regime, then anyway, I don't know if it still holds, but you couldn't move back to the old regime.
No, you can't. Once you switch, you're stuck.
Exactly. So I think that's the idea here. And I do see the value in it as well. And, it's something that's being offered to citizens to move to this.
Right. And Aparajita, this is another question that I'd like to direct at you from our audience. The new income tax scheme, I'm guessing they mean the new set, new rules. Is there no benefit at all for senior and super senior citizens?
Actually, I haven't looked into it. So Shavir, if you have looked into it, please go.
All right, Shavir.
Yeah, sure. So there is no tax benefit per se for the senior citizen, or at least hasn't been mentioned in the speech, but there is one very good benefit for the senior, for all the pensioners, I would say. The Senior Citizen Savings Scheme, SCSS.
Yeah.
So the limit used to be 15 lakh per person or 30. So that has been increased from 15 lakh to 8 lakh, 30 lakh rupees.
30 lakhs, yeah,
They're
correct.
offering an interest rate of 8%. So, 8% on that 30 lakh, which is like a 40,000 per month, sort of like a pension. Now that is a substantial amount for all the retired people. So I think that's a very good move, even for post office monthly income scheme. So even for that, the limit has been increased from 4.5 to 9 lakh rupees. Again, that is a substantial amount. So I think that is, these two are the benefits for all the senior citizens and pensioners.
Right. Okay. And now, Anant, while we were discussing, before the session started, there was something interesting that you mentioned about ESOPs, like a change that had been brought in regarding ESOPs. So if you could tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a change necessarily for ESOPs, but it was just an observation that I had. Is the reduction in the surcharge, which is there in the highest sort of tax bracket, which brings your maximum marginal tax down from 42.77, which was one of the highest in the world,
right,
down to 39. And I was sort of, as I was absorbing that, I was internalizing what are the potential implications of that. And one of those, I mean, that I was thinking about is the impact on ESOPs. Now, ESOPs is a great sort of is a great tool to attract and retain talent. Right. And you and depends on how early on you are in the journey of a particular startup. And I'm talking more in the context of a startup here. How early on you are in your journey as a startup. These can be, if it's a high growth startup, these can be very accretive. Yeah. Over a period of time, maybe 4th year, 5th year, 6th year, and so on and so forth. And typically, ESOPs are taxed at the time they are exercised, and they are taxed as income. Yeah. It has the ability to create. I mean, there is a wealth creation opportunity through ESOP, which is higher than that you would typically have in income, as you observed typically in the trends as far as startups are concerned. So it wouldn't be highly unusual that for that particular assessable year, if there is a liquidity event, for example, where there's an opportunity for you to be able to sell your securities that you've got through ESOP, or you're going to go to IPO or so on, that you would exercise those ESOPs, and therefore for that financial year, you could be accessible to the highest sort of slab of So the reduction in the effective sort of maximum marginal tax rate from 42.7,
I think 42.7
about to 39 is actually is meaningful relief. So I mean, I think that was one of the sort of observations that I was thinking about, particularly in the startup context.
Now, so this is actually you then raise a point that I was coming to, which is this is something that they have done. They have reduced the surcharge on the top tax rate, so that the effective tax rate comes down. Now, is this do you feel a sensible move? I mean, again, I'm going to ask all of you. What is the thinking behind this, and what are the possible implications? So, Aparajita, start with you.
Yeah, I think, Sharad, it's very important to preserve the incentives for innovation in any economy. And I think given that, the government is really, and Indian startup ecosystem is really sort of picked up, and there's so much money in the world which has nowhere else to go, to be honest. Because India is such a huge market, China is closed off, India is English speaking, we are a democracy. That money has to come to India in some form. I think even though we are in a funding winter, we see that in fact, big tech companies are laying off so many people. Indian startups are still growing because we have a huge domestic market that is still untapped. And I do think that, it's important to stop the leak of people who are making money. There will be, of course, in a sort of market economy. There will be people who will make money when startups are coming up. It's important that they continue to stay in India, because they will then, become philanthropists. They will be huge taxpayers. They are creating so many jobs. So I do see that, if that effective rate was so high, and I'm also friends with a lot of people who are, founders of startups who made a lot of money, and they've been thinking about, moving to other countries. And if we can stop that, I think it's good for the country. Of course, now the budget is a zero-sum game. So if you're going to lose some money, it has to come from somewhere else. So I have my sympathy with the government. And, somebody would say that, why are you protecting the rich when we have so many poor people in India? But it's always a very tough, tight rope to walk. But I do think that, that effective rate was too high, and there was some need to act. Otherwise, we would lose people, and that wouldn't be good for India as well.
Shavir, you kind of agree with this, or do you have a contrarian view?
Yes, I completely agree on this. Just to add to this, at 42.7%, India had one of the highest tax rates across all countries. I wouldn't say absolute highest. There are countries which have more than this, but one of the highest tax rates.
And of the major economies, I think we were the highest, right?
Yeah, correct. So reducing this even by 3%, makes complete sense. Hopefully that will stop all of these rich startup folks, from going and settling abroad to just settling down in India. So I agree with what Aparajita has to say.
And Anant, I know that you do agree with this, right?
Yes.
No, sorry, no, it's not for personal reasons or anything. I mean, I wish I fell within that tax bracket and could avail some of these.
I honestly, I didn't mean it like that. I just knew that since talking to you before the panel started, I knew this is how you.
Right. No, I agree. I think one of the things that was clearly coming out is that the current, the previous sort of at 42, it was. It did discourage a lot of talent within the country, and it encouraged. I don't know whether 42 to 39 is going to keep people from not moving out of the country. I don't know what the delta is. I think the other sort of point is the ultra high net worth individuals.
Yeah.
Their value is not generated through income, and their value would actually come through sale of assets and securities that they're holding. So I don't know to what extent there is going to be a significant impact in terms of tax collections from the government. So it could just be one of those things. So it's not like they're targeting the ultra high net worth, for example, because they could potentially be earning a lesser salary, but their value doesn't come from the salary that they earn.
That's the other thing, right? There's now a bunch of studies that say that the ultra rich, their income to wealth ratio is actually really low. Most of their wealth is actually in terms of assets that are taxed only at the point of sale. Like, if you're holding onto a house, there's no tax on it until you sell that house. And same with stocks and various other assets that you have. So they're going to have to figure out some way to either tax that or, figure out to get like some money from the ultra rich back. But yeah, I feel that income tax might be not the best way, because it'll just drive them out to other countries.
Also, I think they have started to plug some of those. Sorry, there's not a question, but just in continuation of that particular statement, I think, the introduction of LTCG about 3 years back on listed securities was one of them, right? And of course, long-term capital gains went untaxed for a certain period of time, and therefore the gains were, and that was, a lot of the double tax avoidance treaties that you have had with overseas jurisdictions. The indirect. There were a lot of capital gains exemptions that were available to foreign investors, and of course, to some extent, those have been rationalized. Even in the current budget, actually, and this is something that we were talking about earlier as well. Earlier, if you were to sell your shares and this is in the context of a startup founder, right? For example, if you were to get a successful exit, all of the gains that you would make from the sale of those securities, if you were to invest into a residential property, those gains would be exempt from taxation. So, I mean, one form of rationalization that Madam Finance Minister has sort of announced today is that the exemption is then available up to 10 crores. So earlier it encouraged a lot of startup founders to go buy bungalows in Luton Delhi. If you go to Aralias and Camellias in DLF, you'll find a lot of successful exit founders who bought houses there. But I mean, this is one sort of reasonable check that is coming.
Right. And so now we've talked quite a bit about the taxation side, the receipts side, but we also need to talk about the spending that the government is doing. And now, Aparajita, you had mentioned earlier that those who are keen on the social sector might not be as thrilled with this budget as everybody else is. So could you tell us a little more? Like, what were the expectations? Basically, what have they done and what have they missed out?
Right. Thanks, Sharad. I think, sometimes when we look at the budget, all of us, we forget that 90% of Indian economy is actually informal. Only 10% is formal. And, when we talk about the tax side, it's usually coming from that formal economy. And I think that informal economy, of course, the pandemic happened. It's still very much recovering from the after effects of pandemic. And I think the hope was that some of it has been continued, that the support that was given continues this year as well. I think on food security, that support is still very much there. But for example, on Narega, on livelihoods, that support is not that much there. So Narega, if you see, it's 60,000 crores. It's not as high as it was in the last 2-3 years. And somebody may say that, there were lockdowns, etc. So there was a higher need. But I think going back to where it was is also not something that was expected.
But isn't that, as in, so just to play the devil's advocate, isn't it a good thing that people aren't so dependent on Narega? That does this mean that rural job creation is picking up, or does it just mean that these people are happy to rely on the free food that they're getting, and so they aren't going to work at all? What does it mean that,
Yeah. So I think, Narega is a demand-driven scheme, right?
Yeah.
So it's a right that anybody has, and anybody can go and ask for 100 days of work. Much demand last year, I would agree with what you have to say. But if you actually look at the revised estimates of last year, they are 89,400 crores. And our budgeted estimate this year is 60,000 crores. So that means there is demand for Narega, which we are probably not being able to fulfill this year if we were to just go by our budgeted estimates. And even budgeted estimates, last year we had 73,000 crores. And this time we have 60,000 crores. So even B has gone down. And our revised estimate was actually much higher than our budgeted.
The B, yeah.
So this basically shows that, we are not in sync with probably what is happening on the ground. Because Narega is a demand-driven scheme. Also, on some of the other things, for example, health and education, I think if you look at actual spending, it's gone up, but as a percentage of the budget, it's actually gone a bit down than last year. That also is not something that was expected. NULM, which is the National Urban Livelihood Mission, it has been completely scrapped this year.
Correct.
And to be honest, actually, NULM did have its problems a little bit, but I think what has it been replaced with? Because there is a need for urban livelihoods as well. That is not something which is really clear. Another piece that I think is something that we were hoping to see more of was actually a bigger gender budget. And I think even though gender budget has increased, so if you actually look at the gender budgeting statement, it is 4.95%. And last time it was 4.33%. So it's actually increased.
Right.
But actually hoping for even more given the amount of focus on Nari Shakti. If you looked at the Republic Day parade. If you looked at the economic survey yesterday, there has been a lot of conversation around the fact that women's labor force participation in India is really low.
Abysmally low.
Countries. In fact, yesterday, I think economic survey also spoke about it a lot, but then also spoke about the fact that maybe the measurement in itself is not correct. But anyway, we can discuss that. But we were hoping to see more support for, things that would enable women's labor force participation, like the creche. There is this Samarth sort of, which is a clutch of schemes which Ministry of Women and Child Development has. There is Sambal scheme, which Ministry of Women and Child Development has, which focuses on women's safety, etc. We don't see actually that much increase in allocations there. So I think that is something which I felt would be really, I was personally hoping that there would be more attention to that. Also because women vote has started to matter a lot more. So we were that in the run-up to elections, given this whole conversation about Nari Shakti, in fact, Prime Minister Modi himself has been talking a lot about women's labor force employment now. So we were hoping to see more budgetary support for those things as well, but that has not been the case.
So, I mean, do you feel that then this is the kind of trade-off, like if you say that, the government has walked a very fine fiscal path and between populism and pragmatism and all of that, then as you mentioned, like something has to be cast by the wayside. It's just that they might not have chosen the right things to cast by the wayside.
I think I am not the right person to say whether it's right or wrong, because it is a trade-off and there have been some allocations. For example, on tribals, there has been a lot of focus.
I was going to say, there are some things that they did announce.
Even on the social sector. And of course, I mean, they were a neglected population. So it's good to see that focus coming in. And I think generally this government has been focused on tribals. Even the nomination of the president, for example, it was a political statement in that sense. So I think, of course, the government has to decide where it wants to put its money. I don't know whether it's I am unable to say that, whether it's the right trade-off or not, because of course, I think maybe the social sector spending, the increase has not been that much, because I think what they are hoping for is, at least that's a sense that I got, there's a lot of focus on formalizing the economy. They're hoping that that in itself will lead to some benefits for people who are right now outside of the formal economy. Right. So focus on digital infrastructure, and then so much focus on physical infrastructure, which will obviously create a lot of construction jobs. And, it does have a multiplier impact on the economy. So I think they've chosen to take that path instead of the path of giving more social security, more social security support. So I think that is ideology. There's no right or wrong about it. And
I get it.
Logical choice to make that I want to, this is what will create support. I don't think they are blind to the fact that social sector needs support. It's the question, how do you give that support?
Right. And so now this actually brings us to another aspect of the budget, which the FM actually didn't mention at all, except when she talked about an existing scheme about the free food for the rest of this year. She didn't mention subsidies even one bit. So Anant, I mean, does that mean that they're kind of going to go easy on subsidies this year because oil prices are likely to settle down, fertilizer prices will also kind of ease? I mean, do you feel that that's the impression you got?
Yeah, I would think so. But I actually haven't sort of internalized a view on that, but that's very clearly the message, at least conspicuous by absence, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. But then the other thing that was absent in her speech was defense. And looking at the numbers, I think they have allocated quite a bit more this year than last year. So Shavir, again, I come back to you just on the coming back to taxation, because it's the highlight of this budget, really. So, what are some of the other changes? Like they included standard deduction into the new tax regime, right? So
Correct.
that also is an encouragement for people to join the new regime.
Correct. So Sharad, I'm not sure how much. Although it's a benefit, but it's like a 50,000 benefit. But I'm not sure if that would be the ultimate motivator for people to move from the old tax regime to the new tax regime. One taxation, not the benefit. One taxation which I would want to talk about is the 20% TDS on Forex transactions. So
Yeah.
this is previously it used to be 5% TCS above the limit of 7 lakh, but now it is 20% TDS and it has no limit. Even if you spend 1 rupee, you are taxed 20%. So maybe what will happen is if you invest in the US markets and if you say buy $1,000 worth of stock, now you will be able to buy only $800 worth of stock. 20% you will have to pay upfront TDS. You can still claim that, but it is just a cash flow mismatch issue. So that is one thing which is very off about which not a lot of people are discussing. Another point in this 20% TDS is, so if say I'm traveling abroad, if I'm traveling to Singapore or Europe, and I booked my travel package from an Indian operator, and I'm supposed to pay 20% TDS on whatever my final bill is. Right. But if I made my bookings from say a booking.com or from Expedia, which are not located in India, then I think we are not supposed to pay that 20% TDS. So I think the Indian operators are at a disadvantage when it comes to 20% TDS. And I was reading up somewhere, that the number of people who travel abroad every year are more than the number of taxpayers. So maybe it's a strategic move by the government to get those people into the tax bracket. So not sure, but yeah, this is one thing which I found unique in this year's budget.
Right, and now I think we're coming to the final question, or the final actually two questions. One is something that you all had mentioned before, which is this new tax regime disincentivizing people from saving, from putting money in insurance? Because there are no exemptions in the new regime. So by making it more attractive, all of the exemptions that you were getting from putting money in insurance, putting it in PPF and all of that, you're no longer going to get those. So is this the kind of the right message that should be going out? Again, I'll start with Anant this time.
Yeah, in fact, we were all sort of discussing this a little bit earlier. What the old regime did, whether or not people did it for the right reasons or for the conscious reasons, but by force of design, you had to sort of at the time of filing your taxes, or even before, when you sit with your employer, they give you they ask you for your declarations. If you're a first-time employee or a second-time employee, or you sort of early or young in your journey, and that's when you actually should start saving, by the way. And when you're early in your journey, you start asking them, what does it mean? What are declarations? And that's when your HR guys will start advising you. Then you go and talk to a CA maybe, and you have a friend and say, what does this mean? And they say, look, no, it's for your benefit. So, but it means that I will have less disposable income at this time to go and say watch a movie or whatever. My entertainment budget comes down. But it's like, look, I mean, not only does this encourage saving, but also you tend to get, you can claim tax benefit from it. So inadvertently, whether or not they would have liked to have done it, it encouraged you to do it. I think potentially, and again, this remains to be seen. But potentially this could come down.
Right, and Shavir, do you feel the same?
So there are two ways to look at it. I mean, one is what you said. It could demotivate people to stop saving and spending all the money, because there is no point of saving. There is no tax deduction on saving and investing in such schemes. But the other way to look at it is now, we used to evaluate investments by looking at their whether they're saving our taxes or not. One example is NPS. We used to invest in NPS because it was saving taxes. We used to prefer NPS over equity mutual funds, which, as we all know, have given far superior returns.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe it encourages investors to not just invest for saving taxes, but for actually, if this instrument is good or not. And maybe, this move motivates more investors to move towards formal, more regulated instruments such as equity mutual funds. So, there are two ways. So that is what I would say.
Yeah.
But the insurance
I also think that, I think in pandemic, if you see, so many new investors entered the market, and which is why one of the reasons why our markets really went up, right? So I think I also worry about this, that all this young India will also get old at some point. So we also need to make sure that there is enough social security in the system to take care of people when they all get old.
And is there enough financial literacy for them to know that they must save for that period?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I do think that, I do think that when the government is thinking about Amrit Kal and 25 years from now, and I think there have been some discussions around this also, that we also need to at some point start preparing for that aging economy as well.
Yeah.
This question that we are discussing right now also relates to that. We can't just think about what happens right now in a person's life, what do they do with their disposable income, but you have to think from a full lifetime perspective. And then if we are taking away this compulsory sort of investment, then is there something else that we can do to give that impetus, whether it's financial literacy, whether it's, I don't know, some part that employers play, etc., to actually have that kind of social security for when these people get old.
Right. And now, I guess my last question, and I think we've covered most of the issues that affect all of us, the common man, and even the marginalized sections and all of that. So my last question is actually going to be a general one for all of you. Overall, I won't ask you to rate the budget, but overall, I would ask you to rate your own satisfaction from the budget on a scale of 5, let's say, where 5 is very satisfied and 0 is, well, I hate it. Aparajita, you can start.
You are asking for a number, Sharad. You said you will not ask for a number.
Not for a number on rating the budget. I'm asking you to rate your own satisfaction from the budget.
Okay.
Because different people will be like, will look at different things and be happy about different things. So
yeah, I think for me, it's neither good nor bad, to be honest. I would have been happier if there was a little bit more social sector spending and a little more focus on youth, gender, education, health. But that's just me.
solid 3.5.
Yeah.
Shavir?
I would rate it 4. There have been a lot of positives, but one particular positive, which will impact a lot of people like me, people who are influencers and small businesses. So the tax limit on consultants, as per section 44 AD and 44 ADA. So where presumptive taxation, previously the limit was 50 lakh, now that has been raised to 75 lakh.
Yeah.
And small businesses which were into manufacturing, they had 2 crore tax limit. Now it has been raised to 3 crore. So
Right.
That one benefit is going to impact a lot of us. So just because of that, I will rate it 4 on 5.
All right. And Anant?
Yeah, I think I'd rate it a 4 as well. One of the things that sort of is presenting the absolute counter position to Aparajita, I think, a little bit, is that's sort of reflecting the other end of the spectrum. It's not that I particularly disagree with what Aparajita is saying, but sort of giving money back to Middle India, which I feel this budget does have the potential to. When I say Middle India, it's, like I said, 70 to 80% of those who are below 7 lakh income group, has the potential to drive consumption within, and Mensa is a consumer retail company, and I'm hoping that they would come and consume more of the goods that we manufacture. So I think on a personal front, I think I'm a little bit neutral. I don't think. I mean, there was a lot of conversation about some of the benefits to, and maybe some of those are a long shot, but you can always hope. Which some of the things that we were hoping in the startup community from a taxation standpoint to come in. Right. But which didn't mention. I didn't think it was government priority, but I would have been happy to have been surprised if they did.
Okay, cool. So now this is a message from our team, which is that we end up hosting a lot of subscriber exclusive webinars like this one, and we encourage people to kind of subscribe, because that's how you can ask us questions, how I can ask the questions to our panelists. So please subscribe to not only our YouTube channel, but also to ThePrint, and so that you can take part in more such really, really illuminating discussions. Thank you all so much for joining us. This was a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sharad. Thank you.